Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, and again joined by my co-host and Executive VP of Elite Consulting Partners, Stacey Frank. How you doing, Stacey?
Happy to be back. Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Stacey with an E.
C-E-Y. Right. Tagline.
Get that straight. Anyway, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we hope that you find this podcast enjoyable, educational, real. These are not scripted conversations, although we have an idea of what we want to talk about today, which is generally things that have come up during the course of the week with our advisors in different conversations. And so we think that these are always enjoyable. But anyway, today's call, and it's a podcast, but it's also a YouTube video. So if you're not listening to us or watching us, don't forget we have a YouTube channel, which is Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. You can see our studio. You can see the cool new jacket that I'm wearing.
I know. Pretty in pink or
pink.
red.
It's red.
Rosy and red.
Ferrari red. It's got the Ferrari badges on the inside. I made it special for last weekend, which actually is one of the topics we want to talk about this week. Today has to do with some of the things that I learned from that past weekend and how important KPIs are to being successful, not necessarily to a practice.
What's a KPI?
So key performance indicators. Just for our listeners. Yes. A lot of people like
the alphabet soup.
Yes, alphabet soup. So we're gonna do the 911 on the KPI. Right?
That's good.
Something like that.
That wasn't scripted either. That
was not scripted.
Right.
911 on the KPI. But I was thinking about this on the flight home. So last weekend I went to Utah, and it was basically a driving school, Ferrari driving school, racing school. Learn how to race cars, obviously cars, right? What else are you gonna race? Anyway, so during the sessions, we'd have a session and we'd go 3-4 laps. And then you'd come back to the paddock, and then you'd go upstairs, the garage, I should say paddock, it's not a horse. Although it is like a horse. It's a Ferrari prancing horse. Okay. But Daisy, you'd go, so they had the whole crew there, the whole racing team, and I had a section in the garage where you would then go through the analytics, KPIs, key performance indicators. And so they would take our disc and our card, and they would stick it in the computer, and then they bring up a dashboard, and it had our steering wheel, it had our gas for acceleration and speed, our braking, and turning, right? And so basically those 4 things, and we focused on those things each time. And we dialed in on just tweaking 1 or 2 things each new session to get your performance better, right? So those were the key performance indicators.
And those are things that you can actually control. You actually have proactive control over those factors. And that's a great point, because many people confuse a KPI with an actual result, meaning, so in an advisory practice, they might think, well, I opened up 5 new accounts. So that's not really it's an indicator, but it's a result. It's not outcome. It's the outcome. It's not a controllable, like you can't just say, oh, next month I want to open up 7 new accounts, right? The question is going to be, well, how do you do that? What are the action steps that you have to take, and you have to work backwards that allowed you to open those accounts? And so you have to work backwards. And so for every firm, it's different. I mean, I have one client that they have one KPI, and that is interactions with centers of influence. That's the only thing that they track, because they know that if they increase their interactions with centers of influence, and that interaction could mean they went to a party with them, they went to a lunch, they had them at a social gathering,
They invited them to a social gathering.
But within that KPI, the centers of influence, you can also probably break it down as to what those actionable items are with those centers of influence.
In this case, and I thought that's where they were going to go with it, they actually don't. That's really simple.
They just count
They know and they have faith that if they can increase their centers of influence interactions by 10%, they know what that's going to, and I'm simplifying it, right? But they have the percentage of how many times, and based on how many times they increase, they can bring it down to what are they bringing in assets over a period of time, right? So they boiled it down. For us, for instance, it starts with the number of dials, but it's really about introductions for us. So how many conversations do we have? But in order to have conversations, we have to have outbound dials, right?
Outreach.
We're calling financial advisors that want to talk. And so if we can drive that number, then we're going to increase the number of conversations that we have, which means that we're going to increase the number of clients that we get, which means we'll increase the number of clients we help move to firms. So that's how it works. So for us, we want to talk to a lot of clients, but in order to do that, we have to focus on a handful of key drivers. So going back to the Ferrari weekend, because I want to talk about Ferraris and racing, what we were able to focus on for me at the beginning was my brake pressure on and off. Just that one little thing. So harder on and slower off. By doing that, I was able to increase my lap times. So most people would think, well, your lap time is your performance indicator, how fast you were going. But we weren't even looking at the lap times, right? It was all about brake pressure, because the better your brake pressure.
It's really detailed. How do you measure that?
Well, because they measure it on a little thing, and you can see your brake pressure, right? They have a chart, and each lap time I got closer and closer to, because then they overlaid the professional driver. So every session, my chart looked closer and closer like the professionals. And as that chart increased, so then did my lap time.
Interesting. So the lap time is actually the outcome.
The lap time is the outcome.
That's the result.
Right. And I wasn't focused on the lap time. Oh, how do I need to go faster to increase my lap time. Actually, no, I just need to work on my braking pressure, which ultimately increased my lap time. Because what happens there, if you don't know anything about cars, which I learned, by hitting the brakes harder at the beginning and then letting off on the brakes slower, I kept a more consistent speed, controlled speed going into the turn. And then at the apex point, which is the point at which the turn is where you're supposed to turn in, is the highest point of the turn. Then I can apply gas. And so there was less of a delay between the brake and the gas. So I kept a more consistent speed, which enabled me to get at a higher top end speed out of the turns, which is what then increases your lap times. So Very counter to what I thought, very technical. But my point is, they only focus on those 4 things, right? So every practice, bringing it back to the financial advisor, every practice, you know, there are a few things within your practice that drive business, right? And, a lot of people feel like they don't need to focus on that. There are some people, candidly, that don't like to do this because it holds them accountable.
Well, that's what it is. It sometimes exposes things that you're doing or seemingly busy about, right? Versus what you're not doing. And if you don't have an accountability system, it's sort of an exposure system, sort of exposes what you're doing, measuring what you're doing versus what you're not doing. And ultimately, that's what you can control, those actions, those activities, which breed the result. In our world, it's moving an advisor to the right place. In Ferrari world, it's laps. In pickleball world, maybe it's, winning the match. How many more strokes do you have over the net? Anyway, you could probably apply it to just about anything. But I think the point is, it's the activities, the actions that you can measure and control. And we say that all the time in training, especially if we're, really ingrained in working with an advisor, and it might be working out, it might be not. We have to go backwards and say, well, what can we actually control? And that's our activities, our outreach, and the conversations that we have with our clients. Yeah.
So if I'm an advisor, one of the KPIs that I might want to use is how many outbound calls do you make to your clients every month? right? How many financial plans do you produce every month, right? Because I guarantee you, if you track, and what happens over time when you track your KPIs, and you have to be obsessed about this. If you start tracking your KPIs over time, you'll start to see patterns, right? So you may not necessarily know all the right KPIs at the beginning. So you start with a wider number of KPIs or categories. And then over time, you take things away. Because what you'll learn is, oh, this KPI was really a result, not a controllable action, right? So you move that to a different list. You can still track results, but track them differently, right? You want to track outcomes. So you go from 6 KPIs to 5, or maybe you have 8, and you go to 7 or 6, which is what we did, right? You know, like for us, and again, another KPI, and this is the whole accountability thing. You know, we track, for me, how many podcasts did I do this week? Because it's controllable. We either did one or we didn't do one.
Right. There's no gray.
There's no
KPIs,
gray.
Right. Either you did or you didn't.
And I hate reporting back
a 0.
that I did 0. So it forces me, not all the time, but a lot of times it forces me to get in here with Stacey and do a podcast, because when towards the end of the week, I don't want to produce a goose egg in front of my leadership team.
And every Tuesday, so talk about accountability, every Tuesday with our management team, it gets put up on the screen. And everybody's KPIs, well, really collective KPIs are put up there. And the numbers don't lie. And we actually graph it. And if we're not doing enough call volume or enough introductions, then we see where some of those other numbers, essentially the outcome, which is advisor transitions,
right,
falls by the wayside.
Right. So it's like historical tracking, right? You'll start to see these patterns, and then over time, you know, we've been doing this now for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And so now we're seeing historical trends where maybe our calling is going up, but our introductions is going down. And we can work through that, right? You can it's like having a magic, you know, what do they call it? Crystal ball. She's going to call it magic ball. Crystal ball. It's like creating a crystal ball for your business, because you'll start to see certain trends. So let's go back to the retirement planning one, right? If you know that every time you do a retirement plan for a client, or for every 3 retirement plans you do, you bring in $5 million in new assets. Doesn't matter, right? So, okay, well, there's a KPI, number of retirement plans. So if you increase that number to 6, then theoretically you should be able to bring in $10 million over a period of time. But all of a sudden, if you go a month or 2 and you realize you've only done 1 retirement plan a week, you can bet it that your new AUM is going to drop, right? So that's why you have to focus on that stuff, because you can start to see what's going to happen. What we mean by that, and if you're a financial advisor and you have a prospect that you've spoken to, right, calling that prospect again doesn't necessarily mean that should qualify, because that's not a unique conversation.
Right.
A unique conversation. Again, maybe you develop business through CPAs. So how many new CPA relationships did you attempt to add to your pipeline this week? Which means how many new CPAs did you call, introduce yourself as someone that works with CPAs in the region, blah, 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 whatever your script is, right? Like, how many of those, should you do 5? Is it 2? Is it 10? Whatever that number is, if you write it down, what'll start to happen is you'll get away from it, you won't do it. And then if you have, somebody else needs to be recording that information. So like what we do is we have somebody on our team that emails all of us, how many of this did you do this week? How many of this did you do this week?
You can't hide.
You can't hide.
Right.
And so we have to answer to her, myself included. So again, it's having somebody hold you as a business owner accountable to the actions that are going to drive your business.
But I think we've found, and we talk about this ad nauseum really, that really in our business, with our marketing services, we're even identifying that our marketing and our social media services to advisors, that has KPI capabilities as well.
Right.
So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so I've had some conversations over the last couple of weeks And I think that some of our clients, and if you're getting into this whole social media marketing branding world, you should understand the difference, right? Ultimately, getting new clients is the outcome that you're looking for when you start to do branding and social media. And then again, that covers a lot of the things. We're not going to talk about that right now. But the KPIs and the deliverables that you should be focused on, which is what ultimately will lead to new accounts, are viewers, right? Followers and engagement. Those three things. How many people have viewed your content? How many people have started following you? Because then you can start to do things with that. And how many people have engaged in what you're putting out? Engagement means they've responded back to you. They've made a comment. Those are the three main drivers, in my opinion, that you should be focused on when you're talking about marketing, because from there, you can then start to develop other things, right? Engagement. The other one is, there's really four. There's really website visits, right? Because ultimately, that's what you're really trying to do. You're trying to get them to go to your website, because then when you go to the website, you then capture their information, meaning their name, their email address, a lot of times their contact information. And then from there, which is a result, right? That's not a KPI, it's a result. From there, you can then build an action plan. You add them to your newsletter. So how many newsletters did you publish? We track impressions, right? How many impressions did we get the previous week? We're up to, I don't know, somebody said 2 million or something like that.
By impressions,
it's
just
not
means just clicking the like button, right? You can track when someone is slowing down.
Yeah, it's like
right.
Yeah, it's like a fraction of a second or 1.3 seconds or something. I don't know the exact number, but an impression means that someone was on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and they stopped at your post to just look at it, to view it.
There's a pause.
There's a pause, not just scrolling past it. That's an impression. So you want to start with an impression, then you want to get with maybe they engage, which is important, and that's the beginning of the funnel. So all of these things we're talking about are the beginning of the funnel of whatever you're trying to drive, right? Obviously, we're all trying to make money. We're all trying to drive revenue. The revenue is the outcome of all this other stuff.
Right, and people sometimes get impatient, right? They get impatient with having their sights on the close or the new client or the advisor transition or the financial plan, whatever it is. They're so focused on that, but they forget about all of the things that lead up to drive that outcome. And that's really what the purpose of this conversation is. Whether it's Ferraris or marketing or financial plans or moving advisors, I think it all ties in together.
Right. The one client I was referring to with the centers of influence, they started off doing some marketing, and then what they noticed, and this is how they knew it was working, is they would then go to like not happy hour, but they'd go to an event, a gala or a charity event or something, and people would start to say that they saw their post or they saw something online. They saw them. Oh, I saw you did a charity golf outing or a charity clay shooting event. And it allowed them to then engage in a conversation that they would not have otherwise had, right? And it gave them some credibility also. And that's how you know your social media is working. It's not like, why isn't the phone ringing, right? Have we been doing this? I've been posting on LinkedIn for 2 months and the phone's not ringing, right? That's not how it works. Nobody is that dynamic.
Right.
Not even me. Nobody is that dynamic that they're going to see your post and be like, that's the guy I've always wanted to talk to. It's a repetitive thing over time where they remember what you're putting out. It's meaningful to them and you're connecting with them. And then ultimately they'll then look at your website or they'll engage with you. But I think that with KPIs in general, you have to be patient. So with my one client, Centers of Influence, patiently persistent. Patiently, you should trademark that. They know that if they increase their centers of influence, say that 10 times fast, centers of influence, it's not like right away they bring in new assets. They know that within 6 to 12 months of those engagements, they'll have net new flows that generally have come from referrals from those centers of influence. That's where all their business comes from.
Consistency over time. Compound pounding over time.
Compound pounding, another one, right? I'll give Ed my letter credit on that one. And so, so for them, it's really focused on that. What do we, and every single week they focus on that. How can we increase our engagement with centers of influence? What other things can we do? And so there's a group of them on the team, and it's a sum total. So everybody has their own number, right? And then the company has a total number. So each person has to report their number of interactions with centers of influence. Again, and so in theirs, it's actually not new. It's actually totals. Because with centers of influence in particular, it may take 3 or 4 or 5 interactions with a center of influence for them to get comfortable to refer. Right? So that's why they track total.
Right. So sometimes it's familiarity.
It's familiarity, right.
How many times have we heard, gosh, Frank, I've heard your voicemail 7 times over the last 6 months. Sometimes that's what it took. I've listened to all your voicemails. I've seen all your texts. I've seen all your emails. And this moment, as a result of all of those measurables, all that activity, now the result is happening. And that's the win. And
so I figured the only way to get you to stop calling me is if I called you back. No, I'm not that bad.
But that's the...
Right. And so, I think that, and there's a lot more to this. There's lots of books. If you want to understand, so one of the books that I read that really has helped me with this is a book written by a gentleman named Gino Wickman that it's called EOS. So Entrepreneur Operating System, or Traction. Actually, the name of the book is Traction. And there's lots in there, but really focus on the KPI component of it. Schedule a weekly meeting. Make sure you have a weekly meeting. And the first thing that you go over in that meeting is your KPI, what they call a scorecard, right? That's a scorecard, which is all that stuff, right? Track those things. It's like in sports, like in baseball, right? What do they count everything? Everything. How many pitches did it? How many? What's the pitch count? And the batter, it's are you taking first ball? First pitch strikes, right? And they dial it all down to the percentages based on each batter, where they throw the pitches. Statistically, if you watch one of my favorite movies is Moneyball. So, but is there a right number? Like for our listeners here, mm-hmm. is there a right number of KPIs? Because you could get really, really maniacal, and maybe is there a point where you're overdoing with KPIs? Yes. Can you have too many? Yes. Okay. I think the number is, at least this is what they talk about in Traction, is somewhere between 4 and 5. Oh, that's pretty good. Right? Somewhere between 4 or 5. Like some of the stuff that we have in our scorecard, they're KPIs, but they're results-based KPIs, right? We probably really only track maybe 4 or 5. So we track dials, introductions, conversations, introductions. What else? Oh, well, no, I mean, there's others, but podcasts. Look, we're trying to grow our head count, right? We're trying to bring in new talent, so we track new interviews. How many interviews did we do this week? Because we know that if we can increase our interviews with potential new employees, new partners, right, we'll hire some people down the road, and so we track that stuff as well. The way to look at it is whatever you're trying to drive, there is a KPI that's responsible for that. Some activity that you ought to be accountable for consistently and constantly. Right. And so figure out what that is in your practice. Happy to have a conversation with you. If you want to just kick around some ideas, shoot me an email, which is frank@eliteconsultingpartners.com, or Stacey @eliteconsultingpartners.com. Don't forget the E. She's testing me like I don't know that. And so, it's really important. I know we sort of talked about this for a while. We're beating a dead horse here, but we talk to a lot of advisors that want to grow their practice, and we ask them, well, what are they doing to grow their practice? Like, well, it's mainly from referrals. Okay. You can't track that. But they can't track that.
You can't control it. You can't control the efforts of other people unless you are on a regular basis affecting it.
Right. Well, it's like, well, we ask for referrals. Okay. Well, how many a week? Well, we don't really track it that way. All right. Well, then how do you know it's working? Right. Just randomly, right? Wouldn't it be better if you knew that you had to, one of your KPIs was, 5, and you start with 5. You want to track how many times during the course of the week did you actually ask for a referral, right? I bet you if you go from 5 and you get a result, then you say, oh, let's see if I can do 7 that week. The result will be better, right? And then go to 10. And so that's where KPIs are important. Be able to then dial that in or out based on the results that you're looking for. So anyway, this is really cool. I had a lot of fun at my Ferrari weekend, and I can tell you that less is more sometimes in terms of these KPIs. So I hope you all enjoyed the show. Again, if you want to check us out on YouTube, go ahead and check us out. It's at Advisor. Hello. See, this is
still in the Ferrari.
I'm still going. I think I'm still going fast.
Are you braking?
Yeah. I'm braking. Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. And don't forget my Instagram account, which is franklarosa.elite. Actually, you can see some things from the Ferrari event there. I actually put a post up of the camera inside the car, me driving around. It was pretty cool. So
you go fast.
I go fast, but I definitely left some speed on the track for sure. I definitely wussed out a couple of times. So anyway, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcasts.